Hi folks, I'm Nick Moffitt for the Dead Draw Gaming YouTube channel. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a professional Pokemon trading card game player. I recently placed 19th at the World Championships for the trading card game, and I've been playing a lot of Pokemon TCG Pocket lately. I'm going to take you through what I think are some of the best decks in the game right now and some of the best ways to play them. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the game, you start with a 20 card deck as opposed to 60 in the regular trading card game, and you can also only have two of each card at max instead of the regular four. The number of prize cards you need to take to win is also cut in half from six to three. And it's important to note that you actually don't set aside prize cards that you'll draw, you'll just accumulate points. So when you take a knockout, you're not drawing additional cards. So that's something important to note. Another thing is there's no energy cards included in that 20 card deck. You're just going to generate one energy every turn of a random type that you select. Most decks are usually just monotypes though, so it'll just be whatever type you're playing. If you're playing lightning, you're just going to get a lightning energy every turn. If you're playing psychic, you'll get a psychic energy every turn. There are some decks that'll use two types, but I don't think they're particularly great. The player going first doesn't get to attach an energy, so typically going second in this game is a big advantage. Most decks will want to go second, get that attachment going. Obviously, you're one turn slower to evolve in that case, but as we'll see, it's kind of difficult to get a stage two into play. Stage ones you can do pretty readily, but having to find a stage one piece and then a stage two can be pretty troublesome. So it's usually better to have that extra energy attachment rather than the faster evolution. And then another thing is no mulligans. So you're guaranteed to start at least one basic in your deck. So we'll see later that some decks will not play many basics to guarantee start with one of the ones that they want. Here are some of the staple trainers that are really important to keep in mind. So we've got Professor Research in the trading card games, lets you discard your hand and draw seven cards. Now with a 20 card deck, that would obviously be way too overpowered. So in this game, it just draws you two cards. There's also Sabrina, reminiscent of Boss's orders in the trading card game, except your opponent gets to choose who they want to switch. Now, if they only have one bench, it's obviously going to do the same thing. But a lot of times your opponent will have multiple bench Pokemon they'll get to choose, but you can put them in situations where, neither of their choices are good for them. Another one is Pokeball. This gets you a random basic from your deck. This is another reason why decks will oftentimes not want to play that many basic Pokemon. That way, not only do they start with what they want it to, but also their Pokeballs are guaranteed to hit the cards that they want. So in these decks, we'll really see that there's not a lot of fluff for the most part. Another was X speed, reduces your retreat cost by one. Really great for mobility, shifting between attackers. You could take a hit with one thing, retreat it, and while you've been powering something up on the bench, don't have to waste energy attachment to retreat. Some other strong trainers to keep in mind. One supporter is Giovanni, lets you do 10 more damage, helps you hit some critical numbers. Like in the Mewtwo deck, as we'll mention earlier, hits for 50 damage for 2 energy. Now, if you do 10 extra, that's 60, which is killing most of the evolving basics. There's also Potion, heals 20, that can help you fix a lot of math on the defensive end. And then Red Card, your opponent shuffles their hand in and draws 3 cards. We have Red Card in the trading card game as well, which would give your opponent a 4 card hand, and that was a very strong disruption. Same with the judge would, as a supporter, would make both players shuffle in and draw four, and those are seen as very strong disruption cards in the regular trading card game. This one is just okay, I would say, with only a 20 card deck. Giving your opponent 3 cards is not that big of a detriment. You only start with 5 cards in the opening hand. Anyway, you put down a basic. So if you play this card on turn one, your opponent only had one basic. You're just reducing their hand size by one, so not the biggest deal in the world, but still a good disruption option to have. Mainly best when your opponent evolves into that stage one. You can play red card, give them lower odds of having the stage two in their hand if they have a big hand. All right, so let's hop into what I think is probably the best deck right now is Pikachu EX. Super straightforward, linear, consistent. For 2 energy, you're doing up to 90 damage, 30 for each of your bench lightning Pokemon. We'll see a lot of lists are playing just 6 basic Pokemon to maximize the odds of starting with Pikachu, but I kind of prefer to play 7 or 8. That way, I'm more likely to get 3 bench Pokemon down on the second turn. And then you want everything in your deck to have one retreat so that the X speed we talked about earlier can let us retreat. So let's say we don't start with Pikachu, we draw it with Pokeball or Professor's Research on the first turn, can bench it, start attaching, attach twice, play X speed, retreat, and start swinging for 60 or 90 damage on the second turn of the game if we go second, or on the third turn of the game if we go first. Since we don't really play many evolutions in this deck typically, it's one that especially wants to go second and put that pressure on as fast as possible before your opponent can get their setup going. And a lot of decks really can't deal with the pressure that this puts on. We see here our Pikachu has 120 HP. The biggest Pokemon in the game only have 180. And the biggest basic EXs only have 150. So we're able to two-shot all of those. Granted, there's no double potion shenanigans going on there. Here are the lightning attackers I like, at least that I've been playing with lately. As we'll see later, there's a lot of different options. We've got Electrode as a stage one. Free retreat is really big. That way, say we start Voltorb and Electrode in our hand, then we don't need X speed to retreat into our Pikachu. It's also got a pretty solid attack in its own right. 2 energy for 70 damage on one prizer is nothing to scoff at by any means, especially given that the Voltorb does 1 for 20 damage. So if you start Voltorb, attach, attack for 20, and the next turn evolve and hit for 70, you're doing the same thing as swinging with a Pikachu EX on turn two would have. And that's gonna, kill all of your evolving basics and two-shot most other things as well. Then we've got the Zapdos. I don't love this one for the attack. It's 3 energy for 100 and does 30 to 1 of your bench. It's not bad if you get it up and running, but 3 energy is a big commitment. The main thing I like about it is that it's a 100 HP single prizer, so it's tanking a hit from most things in the most early game attackers, and then you can just retreat it into Pikachu. Same thing with Zapdos EX. Like, we don't actually attack with this thing that much. It's mostly just a tank to power up Pikachu. Obviously, the Thunder and Hurricane attack for 3 energy, flip 4 coins, excuse me, 50 for each heads can really come in clutch in a lot of scenarios. Like, say you're up against a Mewtwo EX, as we'll discuss later, has 150 health. You could have it in a spot where you took a prize with Pikachu early, and the Mewtwo's going to sweep you. Well, if you flip 3 heads, you can just take them out and win that way. Obviously, it's a pretty low odds thing, but it can definitely save you in some scenarios. So this would be the list using all those attackers, just two of everything, playing all the best supporters and these items. You could swap Giovanni for red card or potion if you like. The plus 10 isn't super relevant most of the time in this deck. One thing is like if you hit for 60 twice into well, even Zapdos has weakness. So yeah, that's a good thing to note about the lightning deck is all these legendary birds, Zapdos, Moltres, and Articuno, which are in some of the top decks, are all weak to lightning. That math is not always super relevant. One thing is you can hit for 60 twice into an Articuno, turn that into 80. Now you're hitting 160, and the Articuno has 140 HP. So you don't need a full bench to two-shot them with Pikachu. So the Giovanni is really the only cuttable card in this list. And you could, like I said, put in red card for disruption or potion for your own healing. Either of those are decent options. So there's some alternate attackers as well. We've got this Pincurchin. He does 30 damage for 2 energy, which is pretty underwhelming, but flip a coin if heads that paralyzed. There's no item switch or anything in this game like there would be in the trading card game. So paralysis, there's basically no way for your opponent to get out of it. So you're buying a turn there while you power up your other attackers. Another one is Strike. Again, 1 for 30, snipe to one of your opponent's bench. So 1 for 30 on its own on a stage one would not be great. But say in the mirror match, you're going up against another Pikachu, you hit them for 90, they've got 120 health, they retreat to the bench. You could come in with Zipstrika and finish that off. Since the Sabrina doesn't act as a boss's orders, you don't get to choose what you bring up. So having a little bit of snipe damage can be nice as well. And both these cards were used in a list that won a big 300 player or so tournament a few days ago. So really solid list all around. They've got one Giovanni and one red card. Again, you could cut the Giovanni for a second red card if you like, but this is a really solid list all around. Another way to play the deck is with this Raichu and Lieutenant Surge package. So Raichu does 3 energy for 140 and discards all of them. So you really only want to do this at the end of the game to take a big KO. The problem with it in my eyes is that you're only hitting for 140, whereas Mewtwo EX, which is the biggest most popular deck right now, I think Pikachu is slightly stronger, but Mewtwo is more accessible because it only takes 2 EXs instead of 4, like the Pikachu deck does. So I think that explains Mewtwo's popularity right now. Anyway, Lieutenant Surge is the support. It lets you move all of your lightning energy from your bench to your Raichu. You can also put it onto Electrode or Electabuzz, but those only attack for 2 energy, so it's not really needed for those. And then there's also this Magneton that lets you Volt Charge, attach an extra energy to it every turn. And then you can move those energies with Lieutenant Surge. The attack on it's not very good. It's 4 energy for 60. But the big player here is Raichu. And you can obviously play Raichu without the Magneton. I've got a list here that's playing both. The issue with playing both is you take up so much deck space, excuse me. You've got these two stage one lines here. And now we've only got room for 6 basic Pokemon, right? Whereas we could just play 8 basics, ignore the Magneton. And with X speed, you can still retreat your Pikachu that has 2 energy on it, attach another one, play Lieutenant Surge, and swing the Thunderbolt. Say you're in the mirror match, you take one prize with Pikachu, retreat into Lieutenant Surge, use it, and swing with Raichu. So I really don't think the Magneton is necessary at all. I just wanted to show an example list that does play it. But you could also just swap this out for like Pincurchin and Zapdos or either the EX or regular, and that would be a perfectly valid deck as well. The issue with this package is it just takes up so much space. So you got the 2-2 Raichu line, 2-2 Magneton line, and the 2 Lieutenant Surge. So that's half your deck already committed to this combo that doesn't even KO a Mewtwo EX. But yeah, if you would go back to this other list, you could just like say swap this Zebstrika line for the Raichu line, and then cut the Giovanni and the red card for the Lieutenant Surge, and then you'd have a list with 8 basic Pokemon that also plays the Lieutenant Surge Raichu package. So I think that could be a really good way to go about it as well. Moving on to Mewtwo X with Stage 2 Gardevoir. This is a really good deck as well. It's the most popular one right now, as I mentioned earlier, due to accessibility, only having to get 2 of those Mewtwo EXs, while some of the other decks need 4 different, not 4 different, but 2 copies of 2 different EX Pokemon. And then the Gardevoir you can craft pretty easily. I think it's like 140 dust for those. So that's what I did on my account. I pulled 2 Mewtwo EX. I didn't pull any Gardevoir. So I just crafted the 2 Gardevoir with the pack points that you get. So yeah, basically Gardevoir lets you accelerate 1 extra psychic energy per turn to your Mewtwo. Mewtwo's got this big side drive for 150 for 4 energy. So, and you have to discard 2 of them. So it's a pretty hefty cost, but you can chain it back to back with Gardevoir. So the way I like to play this deck is with Meowth, which lets you draw an extra card on its attack. Because the main problem is just drawing into your Kirlias and Gardevoirs, right? You have Pokeball to search out the routes, but you can't really search out the Kirlias and Gardevoirs. You have to draw into those naturally. So Meowth just increases your odds of finding them sooner. And what I like to do is kind of sacrifice 2 single prize Pokemon and then go in with the Mewtwo. Now, a lot of decks will just play the Ralts and the Mewtwo as their only basics. That way you're guaranteed to start with one of those. And then they'll play the Giovanni, which I don't have in here. So you cut the Meowths for the Giovanni, and the list would be the same otherwise. And then that lets you hit for 60 with Psychic Sphere. So they're hoping to just manually power up a 200G Mewtwo, KO 1 prize Pokemon at the start, and then just get Gardevoir online and start using Side Drive. The issue is it's pretty unlikely to get the Gardevoir line up early if you are just, drawing for turn and playing a research every now and then. So I've been really liking the Meowth. Helps me set up my Gardevoir line a lot more consistently. And like I said, my main game plan would be just sacrifice the 2 Meowths or Meowth and else, then put down double Mewtwo. So if they Sabrina, I can just send up the other Mewtwo and start sweeping them with Side Drive. The potions help with that to give the Mewtwo some more sustainability as well. But yeah, that you could still play Meowth and play Giovanni as well. You would have to cut the potions though, in that case. Here's another way to play it that I really like. The Helix Fossil. It can be any of the fossils. There's 3 different ones. They all do the same thing. They're 40 HP, and you can discard it at any time. So this is really great. You can put it down as something that prevents against Sabrina, right? So say you had a Mewtwo active and your Ralts or Curly on the bench. You're up against the Pikachu deck. They can just Sabrina, you knock out your Curlia, and now your deck is just completely crumbled, right? So what you can do is put down the Helix Fossil. If they play Sabrina, you just send that up. And then if they don't, you can always discard it later on to not take up the bench space. And the good thing about this is it makes sure your Pokeballs only hit Ralts and Mewtwo, and it makes sure that you only start with Ralts or Mewtwo. So I think this is a really great way to play this list. One of the tournaments that I got top 8 in, this won the whole tournament, I believe. So really great list here. All right, on to the next deck is Charizard with Moltres. I've included the regular non-EX Charizard here. All of the lists that I've seen have not been playing that, but it's kind of the same issue where it's hard to get out of stage 2. So having an extra copy of stage 2 is really important. The basic premise of this deck is you want to start with Moltres, use Inferno Dance, flip 3 coins. For each heads, you get a extra fire to attach to your bench. So you could attach up to 3 fire energies. That way, you're attaching 1.5 on average. Because Charizard's got like a similar attack to Mewtwo. 4 energy, 200. This is killing absolutely everything. Discard 2 energy from it. The reason I like the regular Charizard as well, it's got 30 less health, it's got 30 less damage, but this 150 is still killing Mewtwo, it's still killing Pikachu. The only thing you're not killing is other Charizards. But I think that's fine. This is a pretty low percentage meta deck compared to the other two. And you can still always evolve into the Charizard EX, right? No one's forcing you to evolve into this regular Charizard. It's just a backup in case you don't draw the Charizard EX. So here's the list that I would use for this. You don't really need Giovanni. You're one-shotting everything anyway with Crimson Storm or with Fire Spin. Just Pokeballs, XPs, and potions to keep you alive, research, and Sabrina. That's all you need. I don't even know what the other lists play when they don't play this, which none of them do. They probably play red card, I suppose. But yeah, this is the kind of deck where if you set up, you win, right? Nothing's getting through this Charizard except another Charizard. And the idea is you give up the Moltres as you go into the Charizard EX, right? And force them to take four prizes. This deck is also very vulnerable to Sabrina, so I could see you playing that Fossil like we mentioned earlier for the Mewtwo deck. Like say you just have Moltres and Charmander, right? If they Sabrina, you kill your Charmander, you're in trouble. So having that Fossil could let you send that up and sacrifice it instead, and then in the late game you could always discard it so that it's not a Sabrina target of its own. So you could even cut the potions for that if they're not super useful for the healing. But I think they are like Pikachu's two-shotting your Charizard. And so if they got the first hit in, and you blow them up and then they come in with the second one and knock you out, potion prevents that. But yeah, if you really don't want to play this non-EX Charizard, that's what I would probably recommend. But I think playing this is really good. Again, just to increase the odds of you getting one of these into play. So yeah, you have to draw the Charmeleon and the Charizard. It's not easy, even though it's only a 20 card deck. The last deck I'm going to cover today is this Articuno optionally with Starmie EX. A lot of people just play the two Articuno, that way your opponent's forced to go through two EXs. But I think the build with Starmie is slightly stronger because it's less reliant on this Misty card over here. Misty, you choose one of your Pokemon, flip a coin until you get tails, and get an extra water energy into play for each heads. I think this card is pretty silly. It would be a lot more balanced if it was flip two coins and get one for each heads. I think that might actually make it better since then 75% of the time you would get at least one energy, whereas here you're only getting 50% odds to get at least one energy. But then it would eliminate the times where you flip triple heads and donk your opponent turn one going first. Because I think that's a pretty silly thing to have happen. That your opponent hasn't even got to play a supporter, they haven't got to penetrate anything. You're not even supposed to be able to attach energy going first, but you could play Misty and flip three heads and swing with Blizzard, knocking out their routes or whatever. But yeah, the Starmie X version is a lot less reliant on Misty. Same thing, two energy for 90, 130 HP. Very similar to Pikachu, right? Just an efficient attacker. It's got free retreat, which is great as well. So here's the list that I like for this deck. I've got only one Starmie. That way you increase the odds of starting with Articuno. Some people like to play two, and that's fine. Like if you don't mind starting Starmie, or Staryu rather, evolve into the Starmie, then that's perfectly valid. I would just prefer to start with Articuno personally. And then we've just got two of all the best supporters here. A couple of Pokeballs, a couple of red cards for disruption. I think in this you only really need the one X speed. You could go for two and cut something else for it if you want to retreat your Articuno into Starmie more often. But I think it's fine to like sit there with the first Articuno and attack with that, even if it's just Ice Wing for 40, and then come in with the Starmie later. So you don't really need to retreat as much with this deck. That's why there's only the one copy of X speed. And you could cut that for the second Staryu if you like. That's all I've got for today. I hope you guys are really enjoying PTCG Pocket, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.